The last video, Healing by Mindfulness, that was the title of it, triggered quite some discussion among my Dhamma friends. And because the reflections were really very constructive and helping, going quite deep, I decided to share some of the salient points we have discussed. So, Healing by Mindfulness, that was the title of the first video. That video I was keeping quite open, so meaning accessible to larger audience. This video may get more specific because I will go a little bit more into the actual praxis of the Dhamma path. The central point our discussion was going around was how far the conceptual thinking can help the development of the Dhamma path towards freedom, towards enlightenment, towards Nibbana, and how far it can be rather hindering kind of phenomena. So that was the main point. I will speak about it later on, but let us start with easy points. So, for example, we were discussing the possible correct rendering of sati in the original Pali language. Sati, usually translated as mindfulness, which is one of the good translations, clearly. But we were looking for something what would better express the actual function of that mental factor. And actually the largest resonance found the rendering as watchfulness. Mindfulness, that it would be a little bit more general and perhaps even a little bit too much general. And my preferred translation as supervision, that was regarded as a little bit too specific, but in fact I regarded the best one. But okay, watchfulness expresses really the best the function of mindfulness within these three areas of Dhamma practice I was talking in the first video. Probably I will have to summarize the main part of the first video for those who did not see it. I was dividing the practice of Dhamma into three different areas or categories, because the mindfulness has a different role, has a different task within this kind of practice. The first being conventional life, having job, having family, rearing children, having problems with neighbors and thinking about the yesterday, planning for tomorrow, the world of me and the others, conventional reality. And I was making it clear that the main task of mindfulness in this area will be the watchfulness about the wholesomeness and unwholesomeness of our mental contents, of our verbal speech, of the actions of the body, promoting and developing the wholesome things, keeping away or replacing the unwholesome things by the positiveness. So that was the first category. The second would be the area of here and now, bringing the mind towards present moment, the presence of mind. A huge area of already spiritual practice, actually, represented in many different spiritual directions. And the third area, very specifically Buddhist, area of detachment, area of non-identification with mind and body, area of deep insight, to go through or behind the appearance of things, looking behind the stage properties. That was the things I was using in the first video. In the children theater, this painted decoration, a house or cave of a dragon. But if you look on the other side, it's just painted on the cardboard. So the insight meditation has lots of this quality, looking at the creation of our mind. So this was the contents of the first video. The question which arose quite naturally, if it is identical with the threefold division of the Eightfold Noble Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. This is the absolute basis of Buddhist teaching and Buddhist practice. Eightfold Noble Path, everybody knows it. It's a striking resemblance indeed that the first area, Sila, actually means the moral integrity, the virtue. Usually the Buddhism is offering some precepts as a guidelines. And indeed, the role of mindfulness to distinguish that what is beneficial and that what is not beneficial, that's exactly that. And in the second area, it's perhaps less apparent. Here and now, and the Samadhi, purity of mind, developing purity of mind. But again, it has a resemblance as well. Here and now means mainly to come from this mental clouds of thoughts and unnecessary thinking, being driven by the wandering mind into areas which are not helping really. So bringing the mind towards the presence, which is neutral or positive. And comparing it, for example, with the jhanic practice of samadhi, absorptions. Oh, indeed, that's an enormous here and now of bringing the presence of mind to the chosen meditation object. So there is a clear resemblance in the second area as well. In the third area, Panya means wisdom, cultivation of deep understanding, intuitive insight into how the things really are. And the third area of application of mindfulness, to discover the things not seen before. The mindfulness has a kind of a discovering function in the area of the detachment, of insight. So again, there is also a direct resemblance also in the third area, gaining the specific Buddhist wisdom. So indeed, there is a resemblance, but originally it was not meant like that. Actually, my threefold division was rather derived from the two kinds of language Buddha is using in his discourses. That was the foundation for my threefold division. Buddha, mostly he begins the discourses in a very conventional way of talking, using the conventional language of him and the audience and the place and time. But then, through the discourse, he can switch very easily to the ultimate way of reference. So the conventional speech, that's the Vohara Satcha, Samuti. And the ultimate language is the Paramata Satcha, Paramata Desana. The Paramata, that's like looking at the phenomenon of existence and life from the ultimate point of reference, where a human being is suddenly just a composite of 5 components: the rupa, which is the materiality or the form, Vedana, the feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness. And Buddha is very clear on that there is not a 6 skandha, 6 component, which would be the true self. There isn't any. this mind and body. Sometimes it is also referred as mind and body, is not owned by anybody. There is nobody inhabiting the mind and body. That's one of the highest insights actually along the path of Dhamma. The second area would be a kind of a between zone, twilight zone, between these two. It is not yet the Buddhist wisdom really, but it's also not the conventional way being soaked in concept. So that was one point. Also another question, if these three steps of practice, three areas of Dhamma practice, if it should be understood as a sequential kind of practice, the first and the second and the third, or if it is meant like a parallel chord. I think the answer is self-evident. It's the same like the Eightfold Noble Path. You can understand it in a sequential way. First the right view, then the morality, and then some higher form of meditation. Or you can understand it as a chord, all eight together, Eightfold Noble Path. And both is correct and both is true. Because the development finally goes, it has a gradual characteristics. And that we should take what's available and turn it into the food for our spiritual growth. That's the other truth. Before I go to the next, the threefold division has been made just for the purpose of description, having a possibility to explain the things. In a real life, it's clear that in the mind, the mind can switch so rapidly between these different areas of experience. The mindfulness should be trained to that level, to that proficiency, that it will arise almost simultaneously with the life experience, already in the appropriate relationship. That would be the ideal recipe for a wonderful kind of new fully conscious living. Another thing, in the beginning, the area number 2 and area number 3 was perhaps rather a specific time of a retreat, when we have devoted some time period for a specific training. But of course then we are coming back to our everyday life. And many things will actually go back and return to the way before. But it's clear that something in the background of our mind will stay from the retreat time. That's one way it works. The other way is that if this first area in the beginning was so enormous and the second and third so tiny, that with the time we will discover that there is lots of opportunities in our everyday life, here and there, to apply the principle of the second area. When we are cleaning the window, that we can actually switch to the second area and be just here and now with that what I'm doing, instead of planning what I will tomorrow tell to my boss. Or when in our everyday life we become aware that I am holding on some views or on some emotions, and there is quite evident there is a kind of a attachment. So I can apply the third level of practice, working on mental detachment, putting more freedom around these things. It can be so, but it can be also different, and it will change anyway. So that with more and more advancing on the path, that actually the conventional way of living will get smaller, and more will come this new kind of freedom into our everyday life. So this was the easy part of our discussion. Now, coming slowly to the central point, how far the conceptual thinking, reflecting of our mind can help us along the Dhamma path, and how far it can hinder the development of Dhamma. It's a very interesting question indeed, especially for me, because I will speak about it. What is so specific on that question for me? But let me open this important area, referring again. I will refer again to this threefold division of the Dhamma path. It is a very useful, helpful tool to show that there are different categories and different rules reigning within these different areas. The Buddha's teaching is, Buddha set his teaching into the frame. I was talking about that in the rebirth video. The frame of karma, teaching of karma, teaching of rebirth, teaching of samsara, teaching of bhumis. I call it the frame because you cannot scientifically prove the existence of these things. It's rather the probability is very high that these things actually operate and they are real. But you cannot prove it in the rational, strictly rational, logical, scientific way. So therefore I call it the frame. Karma. That what we are doing, what we are thinking, what we are speaking, that the intention, which is the karma, will reflect back on us. There will be a result thrown on us back, positive or negative, the good karma or bad karma. That's the teaching of karma. Rebirth. This is not the only life. The existential unit does not disappear when this body dies. That's the teaching of rebirth. Not that you will be reborn, but that what is carrying the mind and body through this life, this impersonal potential, let's call it, changing all the time, potential going through the time, that this is not exhausted at the normal death of the body. It will call another mind and body together to continue the story. Samsara means the endlessness of this process, going around endlessly. Never-ending story. And it is the fourth teaching of bhumis which gives to the whole of this frame, I call it the big picture, opening of the big picture, which gives kind of a horror-like taste. The modern spirituality likes to speak about these higher echelons of existence and consciousness, and to be reborn in this high level of excellency and beauty and purity and perfection and all that. Very inspiring, but it's just the half of the picture. Buddhism is very sober in these areas, and when it opens the picture, so it opens it completely. As enormously it can go up, that enormously it can go down into the existential spheres of utter misery and suffering. That the human is in this relation somewhere in the middle, and if we are not completely blind in our heart, we can see how even this human existence for some can become a real difficult things to endure. So this is the thing which I value so much on this original big picture, showing us the position in the existence, in the allness, that it is a dangerous position, that we are sitting on a powder keg. When the good karma is spent, and if we are not at the same time creating new supportive good karma, then some of the next rebirth is in the lower realms. Because the karma is that what is carrying, that's actually a major part of this potentiality going through the existences. We are spending that what we are living in, that's the result of past karma. How we react to that, we are creating the new karma. Actually, we can, of course, regulate and change the way we normally react. If we react habitually, the existence is really a perpetuum mobile. The pleasant things we grasp, the unpleasant things we repress, develop hate and repression against, aversion. That's exactly the karma which keeps it going. And the Buddhist path is exactly that, what is, I would say, annulating the important areas of karma which can cause rebirth. This is one thing, speaking about this big picture, because especially for me it was so important, because I am getting from this understanding so-called samvega, the sense of urgency to use this life to do something about it, as a source of acute kind of motivation. Another things which I want to mention in connection with this first conceptual conventional area is the original setup of Buddha's teaching. It is goal-oriented teaching, telling that you are here with the defilements, with ego, with attachments. The ego is the main source of conflicts in the life, cause of difficulties, and all the attachments actually are cause of suffering. And this is the Eightfold Noble Path towards liberation. It is a gradual path to practice, to proceed, to develop towards freedom, towards Nibbana. So that's the original setup of the teaching. There are many things which belongs to the right view, mainly are the deep understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Understanding, realizing, developing. What I am emphasizing here is to understand the extent of the suffering or possible suffering or liability to suffering of a human being in this big picture, not only in the existing contemporary lifespan. So this all belongs to the first area. Now be careful. As soon you start to really practice more systematically in the second and third area, completely different rules apply. Because these conceptual teachings are related to the past and to the future, to the concept of time, and the task in the second and third area is to bring the mind to the present moment as much as possible. Understand this correctly. The teaching clarified in the first area should serve as a motivation and making clear the direction of the development necessary. That's also a very important point. But then it should be somewhere in the background of your mind, because now your task is different. Now your task is to focus on the present moment. Now the aim is not somewhere in the future. Now the aim is right here under your feet. Clear? Some people are confusing this. So I talked a lot about all these small things. Now comes the main thing. Coming to the core point of our discussion, how far the purposeful thinking should be applied along the path of Dhamma. And where is the limit when it starts to hinder the progress along the Dhamma path? Not so easy. It's clear that the wandering mind and all these fantasies, clouds of fantasies and projections, this is definitely unbeneficial, unwholesome in all three categories of practice, that's clear. But there is still a purposeful way of reflecting which can help actually, certainly in the first area. And we will now study how far it can be used in the second and third area. But let me start with my own story. You will understand why is it so important, especially for me. It seems that my mind works somehow differently. Differently from the average, in the sense that I cannot become clearly aware of two things at the same time, and it seems that the majority of people can do it. And this was already before I started with meditation. For example, driving. I had to give up driving because when somebody was talking to me during driving, or even when thought would cross my mind, I wouldn't be aware of the signalization on the side of the road. My driving was becoming dangerous and I gave it up quite quickly. Later in the meditation, well, it's not talking about better or worse. It is simply different setup of the mind. In the meditation, I was, from the very beginning, I was applying anapanasati, being aware of each in-breath and of each out-breath. But now, with my mind, when the slightest thought was going through my mind, or even this kind of commentator, this inner chatter, people call it the thinking, but in fact it is a talking, inner talking. You can say in which language you think, so it's actually talking. And when this was going on, I was not aware of the in-breath and out-breath, and when I occasionally became aware of the in-breath and out-breath, there was complete silence in my mind. Quite beautiful silence, I have to admit. And this was my meditation in the first 15 years. This certain kind of misunderstanding arose in the beginning. The Western teachers, when they arrive, so some of them were asking in the meditation hall, how much % of time you stay with the meditation object and how much of time your mind is off. And people would say half, or 70% on the object and 30% lost in the wandering mind or thinking. Now, my balance, oh, that was much different. I was perhaps 10% or 15% only with the meditation object, and the large majority of time there was simply some kind of thinking going on. So quite often I thought that my practice is not doing well, but it was not true. Actually, I was doing quite well, especially in the beginning. And it's different setup of mind. It works differently. So please don't be discouraged. This is the one reason I'm speaking about it. Don't be discouraged if there are many thoughts in your mind. What seems to be more important than the percentage of clear mindfulness on the object is rather the strength of motivation and clarity of motivation to do it. You know, the perseverance and the stamina behind that. That's what counts really. Now, a little unclarity arose when I connected with Venerable Mahasi's style of meditation. I was practicing everything available in the beginning, hundreds of retreats in Europe and sometimes even America. And of course, you know, later, especially in the Mahasi meditation way, if there is a thinking going on, become aware of the thinking, make a meditation object of it. Okay, so I applied that instruction and the thinking instantly stopped. And there was this silence in the mind. So I would go to the object. But after a while, after some seconds, some minutes, usually some thought would start again. The story would repeat periodically. So just mentioning that for me personally, this point, how much thinking actually can help the process of meditation and how much it can hinder it, was quite a personal one. This was discussed, and there were quite some surprising things, because especially these Burmese methods of meditation. Let's take the Ubakin Goenka, sweeping of the body. When you are aware, the whole meditation time is devoted to become aware of the sensation on the surface of the body. So this is a quite powerful meditation method which almost educates or forces the mind to be silent, because these sensations are very weak, almost like listening to the subtle sensation here. You know, you almost are forced to stop any other activities in the mind to focus on the subtle sensation in your toe in the sitting meditation, for example. You know, you are going actually systematically through the whole body. And also another thing is that the realization are always over-conceptual. The so-called enlightenment, or even insight itself, the insight itself, this moment of opening, of understanding, and there are many of them along the path, it's always over-conceptual, because it's intuitive, it's a seeing, it's not thinking, it's a seeing better than before. So I was quite actually happy with my over-conceptual way of meditating most of the time, and there is lots of scriptural support for that. But if we go to the original suttas, we will be also surprised how much support we will find for the yoniso-manasikara, which is a wise reflecting, conceptual thinking, reflecting, helping the development of the meditation, making clear the direction in which it should develop. I prepared about 2-3 passages from the scriptures which clearly indicates that Buddha was actually working with this yoniso-manasikara, wise reflection, a lot. So the first passage, it is from Majjhima Nikaya, very central teaching, original Dhamma, Sabhasava Sutta, second in this collection. He attends wisely. This is suffering. He attends wisely. This is the origin of suffering. He attends wisely. This is the cessation of suffering. He attends wisely. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. When he attends wisely in this way, 3 fetters are abandoned in him: personality view, doubt, and adherence to rules and observances. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by seeing. So I was looking into the Pali original to be sure about the meaning of these terms. He attends wisely, yoniso manasikara, meaning clearly this is a conceptual kind of rumination in the mind, reflecting deeply. He attends wisely, applying wisdom. This is suffering, this is origin, this is the cessation, and the way leading to cessation of suffering. These are the Four Noble Truths, reflecting about Four Noble Truths. And in this way, three fetters, three samyojanas, will be removed, abandoned in him. Personality view, Sakaya Ditti, Vichikicha, and Silabhata Paramasa, three samyojanas. This is description of the enlightenment, Sotapanna enlightenment, that by reflecting it's possible to arrive at the lowest level of enlightenment. And let's be clear, that's not a small thing. It's the lowest kind of enlightenment, but it's irreversible according to the scriptures. And the result is enormous, in fact. A maximum seven more lives, which means the final liberation is secured. And also the gate towards the lower rebirth is closed. The lowest possible rebirth is in a human sphere. Within the great picture, the big picture, it is an enormous promise. Now, the second passage is even stronger. It's again from Majjhima Nikaya, but be ready. Wherefore, monks, whatever is material shape, past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, low or noble, reflecting all this material shape, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. He should see it thus as it really is by means of perfect wisdom. Whatever is feeling, whatever is perception, whatever are mental formations, whatever is consciousness, past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, low or noble. Reflecting all this consciousness, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. He should see it thus as it really is by means of perfect wisdom. Seeing it thus, monks, the instructed disciple turns away from material shape. He turns away from feeling, turns away from perception, turns away from the mental formations, turns away from consciousness. Turning away, he is detached. By his detachment, he is freed. In freedom, there is the knowledge that he is freed, and he comprehends. Destroyed is birth, brought to a close the Brahma faring. Done is what was to be done. There is no more being such or so. So this means actually that by this kind of mental activity, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself, almost like re-educating the perception, in fact cutting the identification with mind and body in this way, mentally, that the final realization is possible. That's what is described here, the final freedom. That's arahatship actually. So even if this is not necessarily to be understood as a thinking, well, it is a thinking, a special purposeful thinking, applying it to all kinds of manifesting experience, life experience. Always, this is not mine, this is not my, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. The third passage which I want to mention is, I don't know now which sutta it is. Buddha is enumerating 5 occasions when enlightenment can happen. By hearing Dhamma talk, and indeed in the Buddha's time many people are recorded to get enlightenment just by hearing, and different types of enlightenment, not only the lowest one. Some even getting the full just by hearing a passage of the scriptures and opening. So by hearing, by reflecting, the second, by Yonisana Manasikara, by reflecting Dhamma. The third one, by reciting passages of Dhamma. Of course, you have to understand what you are reciting. And the fourth one, by teaching Dhamma. And all of these are more or less conceptual activities, thinking activities of mind, which can catapult the system into the opening of enlightenment. The fifth one is by meditation, or in the meditation, during meditation. And my original thinking that actually meditation is enumerated as the last one, but it doesn't mean that it is less important than the others. Actually, in the culture, in the old culture, the first and the last one was always considered to be the important points of the enumeration. So it is not so that the meditation would be the last one to consider. No. To tell the truth, I was reflecting that in the Buddha's time, the psyche of the people was much more straight, or the internal psychic rectitude was still available. When they have understood something deeply, that could change something irreversibly in the foundation of their being. That's what enlightenment means. And now, exposed to very complex and very crooked also type of civilization, lying on all corners, lies and distortions coming to us from all sides, even from the governments. So it's quite possible to think that today we need stronger medicine to arrive at the same kind of result. I remember, if we have place and time for a little story, Ramdas, our beloved Bhakti teacher, Richard Alpert, the professor of Harvard, psychology professor, the only one which was kicked out of Harvard because he made too many experiments with LSD. But his enormous brightness of his mind was really refreshing for my generation. Now Ramdas is ill. He got a stroke and he's very disabled in this time. But when he was in his prime, thousands of people coming to his expositions. Such a wonderful speaker. And he was bhakti, that comes, of course, this ecstatic talking. And I remember one of his talk when he was in the delegation visiting the Hopi Indians, the chiefs of the Hopi tribes, American Indians. And Ramdas made a joke of it. The hippie met the Hopi. I don't know exactly what they were talking about. I just remember the story, what Ramdas was just giving at that connection. That the chief of the Indians were complaining. One of his people was driving and he was stopped by the police. And on the bottom of his car there was an empty bottle of whiskey. And so they accused him that he was driving drunk. He said that it was a false accusation. He was not drinking. And the chief said, I was going to that man, I asked him, did you drink? And he said, no, I was not driving drunk. And the chief added, and this man does not lie. And Imam Das, because he was already far on the spiritual path, these people can easily open to some kind of intuition. And that happened to Ram Dass, that he suddenly started to understand that there are still on this earth some original tribes, or original individuals at least, with this original rectitude of the psyche, that they cannot lie. They are not yet broken. Because if they would lie, they would completely lose themselves. So in connection with this mental rectitude in the Buddha's time and today, it's certainly different. Our mind is so complicated, all these tricks our mind is very skillful at doing. So we may need some stronger medicine, and that may be a kind of a reason why some of these meditation techniques have been developed, and they are working in some surprising way, for not with everybody, with some people. This particular techniques should never be understood as the whole Dhamma. There is much more to cultivate, but it can be quite a powerful tool, wholesome tool. So I think now it's also the time to draw some conclusion. How far the thinking and conceptual reflecting within the second and the third area of practice, when it is wholesome and when it is becoming an obstacle. I think I brought sufficient material, argumentation and information for or against, so that we hopefully can draw some middle line between. And first of all, I would say that it is individual. All people are different, so it's not possible to say directly what you need and what is not good. And even within the individual practice, it changes from day to day. Sometimes we need more reflection, sometimes not. So we have to wake up the wisdom of the heart, so that we can distinguish when the wise Dhamma reflection is helping the direction of the practice, bringing clarity, helping to overcome some difficult passage. So that's certainly the proper time, and it is supporting the practice. But when this wise reflection becomes just a mental obsession almost, or even escape from the practice, so that's the moment certainly to stop it, or just to make it an object of mindfulness, or just going back to basic meditation object to bring back the clarity of the practice. So this was the thing I wanted to present. Originally I wanted also to add to each of these three categories something. So for the first, I wanted to add this different laws reigning in the conventional mind. The conventional mind needs a kind of goal, not kind of a comet on the sky, which can be giving the direction to the confused human being. But when we are in the actual practice of Dhamma, it changes drastically. here and now. Let all these things about future and what and future life, that's not anymore the topic. So that was the contribution in the second area. Actually, what I wanted to say for the second area was that in the original scriptures there is lots of emphasis on awareness of the body, Kayanupassana. The position of the body, the sensation of the body, the movement of the body, the function of the body, in-breath, out-breath. And one sutta even is referring that it's possible to arrive at the final liberation just by awareness of the body. It's a certainly good meditation object, especially to start each sitting. I am starting each sitting with bodily awareness. Later, when the mind is already stabilized, I usually open the awareness towards the mind, what is happening in the mind. So that was the second. For the third area, the area of anatta, non-self. I think there is unnecessary hassle around this non-self. In the sense, now the last issue of one magazine devoted just to the topic of anatta, of not self. I think people are doing unnecessary hassle around it, making it unnecessarily complicated. Each of the contributors, many pages, articles. If you go to the original scriptures, Buddha is giving a simile, which makes it so clear and it's so simple. A chariot. You have a chariot, you can see it, you can use it. But if you take it into the component parts, if you take it apart, so where is the chariot? The wheel. Is it a chariot? Not. The other things, which I don't know how you call it in English, this one and that one, is that the chariot? No. But if you put it together, so here is the chariot. Exactly with the self. In the conventional sense of life and living, it is normal to use this concept of self. It is an artificial creation in our mind. Nevertheless, the conventional world works with that. So even Buddha was using it. So there is no really problem with that. But of course, if you come to this Paramata Satya, to the ultimate point of reference, there is no support, nothing ultimate supports this idea of self. It's so simple. So there were even attempts to bring this non-self, anatta attitude into the first area of conventional life. I don't think that's really meaningful. The mind and body goes to switch off the television. Lots of wisdom. Sati was usually paired, sati sampajanya, to apply the mindfulness together with the appropriateness in the context, or satipanya, to apply the mindfulness together with wisdom. Actually, in the original teaching, there is also a reference to emptiness, but for the original teaching, more emphasized is the insight of anatta, the non-self. The universal emptiness. I found a passage in Sutta Nipata 2295, which describes the kind of ephemeral characteristics of each of these 5 components of a human being, of a being generally. Form, meaning the materiality. Form is like a lump of foam. Feeling is like a water bubble. Perception is like a mirage. Mental formation like a banana tree. Banana is not a real tree. It is a big grass. There is no wood, no solid wood in banana tree. So sometimes it is the mental formation compared to hollow tree. And consciousness is like an illusion, like a trick of a magician. So this is from original Pali scriptures. The later literature, Sanskrit literature of Mahayana, made of sunyata, this universal emptiness, actually the main kind of objective of the Dhamma development. So in the Daimon Sutra, consider this transient world as a star at dawn, as a bubble in a river, like a lightning in a summer cloud, like a flickering light, a phantom, a dream. And that Buddha even there is a support for this formulation in the original Pali literature. There is one passage: look upon this world as empty. So regarding the world, one is not seen by the king of death, which is a hidden way to indicate attaining of deathlessness, which means nibbana, liberation. So in connection with this universal emptiness, this phenomena and dream-like nature of the allness. Recently I was listening to a lecture of Tom Campbell. He has the theory of a big toe. It's a long one. I was listening just to the first part because the second was not interesting for me. But the first one was interesting. Tom Campbell has a gift of explaining the highly scientific, sophisticated discoveries in a language that the person can really, even without scientific foundation, can understand it easily. And so he would start with the Einstein relativity theory, but then he goes to quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is an enormous development, has many stages, but probably everybody knows this double slit experiment, very famous. You know, these both theories are now almost 100 years old, and the implication of these theories are still incoming, and especially the quantum mechanics getting more and more getting more mysterious actually with each new experiment. And so you know certainly the basic one, the double slit experiment. The light seems to have a double nature. It is a wave, electromagnetic wave of certain length, and sometimes it behaves like a stream of particles. I don't know if these particles are called photons, perhaps, I don't know. So the basic experiment is, if nobody is witnessing, so the light behaves like waves. But if somebody is measuring the light, so it changes into particles suddenly, stream of particles. And there was a continuation of this experiment. It is not the measuring which changes the characteristics of light. It is the consciousness. If somebody is witnessing the experiment, So suddenly the light behaves like a stream of particles. If nobody is witnessing, it is behaving like a wave. And the newest experiment, which is perhaps only 10 years old, very sophisticated, basically again double slit experiment, but many more elements around it, which prove to be, as long it is not witnessed by somebody, even in the time after, it is still in the area of probability, and only when somebody looks at it, witnessing it, then it collapses into particle. Even in the time after, it's mind-boggling, and the quantum mechanics drills such a big hole into the Newtonian physics. But of course, Newtonian physics is still valid in the middle dimensions, but the theory of relativity in the very big distances and this quantum mechanics in the very minute, small, are having different rules. But what Tom Campbell does, that's the point. He takes this experiment and makes an implication on the world, on our world, conventional world. That the world has in principle, a virtual characteristic. The whole allness is just a virtual kind of phenomena. But it is the consciousness, the mind, which collapses into the world of solid objects we are perceiving then. It's a mind-boggling idea, and I like it because it goes quite nicely with Buddhist teaching of emptiness. Buddhism acknowledges phenomena, but empty phenomena, bubbles, foam, dream-like characteristics. So this is a quite interesting message, that the mind, whatever sphere of existence it may turn to be, that it has the capacity to create this kind of a solid world around. That's a very serious message indeed, very serious. But to close this talk, I want rather to bring something positively inspiring. So talking so much about these three different areas of Dhamma practice, it's clear that Buddha is giving already lots of advices for the conventional life, that we, just by moral behavior, that we can improve our life a lot. The good morality is a source of inner joy. We feel good about ourselves. We look at ourselves in the mirror and we get a good feeling. The benefit from the practice in the second area, peacefulness. Of course, in the daily activities, it goes up and down, but the peacefulness is somewhere in the background you can connect with. It's somehow available more and more. And the benefit from the third area of practice is this kind of detachment, kind of a lightness, which is coming into the way of our life more and more. So even when the things go very bad, so still having some fresh air to breathe. That we don't take the personal story so terribly personal, that we can smile at ourselves more and more, and perhaps even at the things as they are.